Because we don't understand how life formed, it is difficult to estimate this probability. The likelihood of a complex molecule like DNA being created by random collisions of atoms in a primordial ocean is fantastically small. In an infinite universe, it would happen in some places, but they would be very far apart. If we want to find advanced intelligent life, our best bet is to listen for radio signals.
Look up to the stars and the forests that surround. Do you see them? Do you hear them? Are they there? SpacedOutRadio.com presents S4 with Forest Moon Paranormal's Eric Cooper and friends. Also, take the time to join the Forest Moon Paranormal Facebook group.
I knew I should have made a left turn at Albuquerque.
Conspiracy, Area 51, Dogman, Ghosts, Cover-Ups, UFOs. The hidden will reveal itself.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go live on S4 with Eric Cooper.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to S4 with Eric Cooper, broadcasting live from the beautiful mountains of Concrete, Washington. And now, without further ado, your host, Forest Moon Paranormal's own, Mr. Eric Cooper.
Hey, good evening, S4ians, and coming to you live from the Cascade Mountains, by the way, of Concrete, Washington. It's an exciting night. We have an awesome roundtable schedule for you. And the opinions and views of S4 do not reflect that of Spaced Out Radio. Oh, my God, you haven't heard of Spaced Out Radio? Hey, coming to you live every night, 9 p.m. to midnight, Monday through Friday, Pacific Standard Time at www.spacedoutradio.com. And we have Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio's own founder and just most awesome buddy of mine and most awesome guy. We also have tonight Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham from the Spaced Out Radio's Newswire. And Markham is also the Forest Moon's scientist. And we have Christina George from Top Secret Radio. I believe I'm going to screw this up. And from Paranormal Connections Radio. So we have an awesome show for you tonight. And without further ado, go ahead and talk, guys. It's time to get this rolling.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey,
Morning.
Everyone, nice to be here.
All right, we got a group. Let's make her happen. So,
All right. So tonight, for how this works, folks, we have everyone comes to the table with 3 questions. They're blind. None of us know what the questions are. Makes it just more exciting. So we're going to start with you, Corey. What's your first question?
my first question of the night is, and this is one that's been asked a few times before, but I really think that it's kind of been one of those that has been misunderstood. And so I'm going to read the question, and then I'm going to read a quote, and then I'm going to let it take off to each one of you to get your opinions on it. First question is, should there be a universal code of conduct for paranormal teams? Now, before you go and answering that question, one of our listeners put in a quote one time when we asked that question that I thought was just beautiful to this. It came from a man of great pointy sticks. And he said, a code of conduct is important because it promotes moral behavior, acts as a guideline for ethical decisions, enhances the reputation of an organization, prevents negative legal effects, encourages positive relationships, and acts as a reference for solving ethical dilemmas. So I am going to turn this over to you guys. What do you think?
well, I think you got to. No, I think you got to have if you're going to be traipsing around in somebody's house or being in a historical building or anything that's got value in it, there really ought to be a code of ethics and a code of conduct. This too many people approaching this as the paranormal as a weekend hobby and going around waving gear in the air and just I don't it looks ridiculous, and I just think there's got to be more to it than that, and it should be a more professionally done activity.
Well, most definitely, and I mean that's why we designed ours as airtight with the Forest Moon Code of Conduct, most definitely. And I think it came up in one of Dave's shows with Taps, where they don't have much of a code of conduct. They're there to take a picture and not even share it with the client. They just take a picture and leave. That's one unprofessional, one unethical. It really pisses me off because those are the kind of groups that we get to clean up the messes for. And that actually leads to one of my pet peeve rants tonight, because one of my questions as well, somewhat, is how do we fix it? For example, we've got a case in Seattle that our client contacted a group. Okay, they said, sorry, you're not in our county. I can understand that. I can respect that. It's a jurisdiction thing. I don't see a jurisdiction issue, but I guess some groups do. But they didn't just, wash their hands of them. They said, tell you what, contact these guys. So they referred him somewhere. He contacted those guys. They didn't respond. So he found another group. He contacted them. They didn't respond. He finally contacted another group who in turn referred him over to us. And, I mean, this is common. You go on paranormalsocieties.com and you look through all, 11 billion groups that are listed in all these states, and you look at the links. About 3/4 of them are dead links or haven't been updated since 2012 or 13 or whatever. You get the point. You call some of the phone numbers. Oh, I'm sorry, we got out of that about 2 years ago. Well, why don't you take yourself off the societies and off the groups? Take yourself off the internet so people don't contact you, so that the actual groups that are still active and doing stuff can, help clients that need it. What's your thoughts on that?
Dave, you're up next.
I think it goes a little bit further than just that. I mean, it's the entire mess of the paranormal industry that we have. It's anarchic, in my opinion. I feel that it is something that is in disarray. There is no true answers. And I am very disappointed in watching this field actually call itself something that can be reliable. It really can be disgusting to watch. Now, a lot of people may disagree with what I have to say in regards to that, and frankly, I don't really care. Because until they prove me wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm a major voice or anything, but until I see a change in difference, right now, I can tell you right now, one team that I have met that does it right. And I've interviewed 100 plus paranormal teams over the lifespan of Spaced Out Radio. And the only team that does it right is Forest Moon. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on this show. There was a prime example of it today where in Indiana, I was asked to help someone if I knew anybody who could help by Edie Kaito, who has been a guest on my show. And she had a friend who was dealing with a possession. And they felt it was something demonic. There was like 3 or 4 different teams that were in there trying to work with this. Obviously not knowing what is going on. Eric sends his team in there, and 2 hours later, this thing is gone. And the whole point that I'm trying to get at is we have too many people out there thinking they know what they are doing. They think that they are by confirming or denying a haunting, that's ghost hunting, which it's not. And without any set of rules or guidelines or regulations that really affect anything to do with this field, all we're doing is passing the buck so other teams have to go clean up the mess. And it's terrible.
Everett, your opinion?
I agree.
And cleaning up the mess is one, time consuming. 2, and taking that a step further, you've got these teams that go in. I had a client in Ohio that she called a paranormal team in. They came in within 20 minutes. They were running. I mean, literally, she said they were almost literally running out of her house. And they wouldn't return the phone calls. She just washed her hands up. And she found us, and we went there, and she's got an ongoing case because it's got a lot more than just spirits. It's got a lot more than just entities. It's got the whole spectrum. It's very one of those spots that you just can't ever clear. But if you're going to watch a TV show and think, oh, cool, I want to do that, and go out and get your little business cards made up and your pretty little website and get yourself a pretty little camera so you can take a pretty little picture and get that cool EVP and think that's all you're doing because that's all they do on TV. They don't do any clearing. And the ones that do clearing have been proven frauds half the time. And I won't mention any shows, but there's some shows that completely disgust me because all these people that don't know any better in these paranormal groups say, oh, I watch that show. It's so cool. And I have to go, no, actually they're not, because I personally know of a case that they've done that got destroyed. And I'm not even going to go there. But, I'm tired of cleaning up messes. We will, and we always will. And, I mean, even exorcists, because exorcism came up today. Exorcists charge money. Uh-oh. We don't charge. Why? To me, that's completely unethical as well. You're actually taking money from someone that's going through a crisis, and you're taking advantage of someone that's in need. And I'm baffled. I'm pissed beyond words because there's a couple other issues that happened today that we'll get to.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right. So, go ahead, Christina.
I was going to say, I was going to jump in. I have a lot of the same issues and agree with what you guys are all saying. I run a Research Society. It's Psychic and Paranormal Research Society of Sacramento, California. And we get a lot of those cleanup type cases as well. And we're starting to see it more and more often. Probably 6 months ago, 5 months ago, we had a case here in California, and I was notified by another team that there was demonic activity at this house, and it was so bad that it had ran the family out. They'd moved out of the home. And so I agreed to come and check and see what was going on. Literally, there had already been 3 teams that had gone to that house. Kind of exactly what you were talking about, Eric. They show up. One team showed up there and they started having some activity. They got scared and they left, never came back. The other 2 that came, the other one that contacted me had absolutely no experience. I mean, she had a small team that she put together, but they basically, we just go to conferences and do little investigations with the conferences, afterwards, or they would go to the cemetery, but they had never had an actual private client. And the third person that they had reached out to happened to be a local person in that town that did ghost walk tours. And so the clients said, oh my gosh, this is right up your alley. Do you, know about ghosts and spirits? Do you think you could help us? And the guy said, absolutely. So not only did he take himself with no experience other than just doing his little ghost walk tours, he took some of the paying clients that were going on the ghost tour that day and offered them to be part of the investigation of a private client later that night. Now, they went in there, they scared the hell out of this couple. They told them that there was demons in the house. They were after their little boy, all this kind of stuff. So when they contacted myself and my co-founder, we both went in to utilize our psychic abilities. And I had a case manager doing everything because I don't want any of the personal background information when we go in. We went in there, and they did have activity there, but it was just spirits. Again, though, having somebody inexperienced coming in, telling somebody that they have demonic entities in their home that is going to hurt them with no evidence whatsoever to back that up, put them in fear. They moved out of their house. We went, and literally within 2 hours, we did the investigation. We did the clearing, cleansing, blessing of the home, the whole 9 yards, and haven't had any kind of activity since. They moved their family back in, the whole 9 yards. But the ghost tour guy was upset that they went to somebody else, so they told them that we were witches and that we were going to put, spells on them and all this kind of stuff to try to get them to not utilize us, because he wanted to basically make their house a haunted attraction on the weekends so that he could bring groups of people to investigate their home. And when she said no, that they were fine, the guy actually started threatening her, and it's crazy. So I agree. There needs to be some kind of, governing body over the paranormal, I would think. But the problem is, I've been saying that for 10 years, and we just don't see it, because even the people who are interested in doing something like that know that the rest of the paranormal field's not going to follow through and not sign up, and they're just going to be going rogue as they always do, creating all kinds of havocs. I mean, we need investigators, we need researchers, but if you don't know what you're doing, and definitely watching, these television shows is not going to give you the training. You need to stay doing, building haunted buildings, cemeteries, but don't go into a private client's home when you don't know what the hell you're doing.
No, stay in the hot spots.
Absolutely. There's plenty of them.
Waverly Hills, you hear about it every day. Waverly Hills, all the hot spots. Have fun. Go. Bye. But right. Leave the private clients who need the help alone, because we'll handle them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes to alien abduction as well. That way, and that's my other pet peeve, but we'll get to that later in the show. But that's the other thing, though, is when is, and I'm not trying to ruffle feathers, Dave, because you guys do a good thing, but when is paranormal tourism, what's the line you draw?
I would love to answer that. I think it's a very fine. You know, one of the things that we do at the museum that I do a paranormal tour on is the first thing that we did, and the committee who runs the museum, the first thing they asked was that I go through each building that is haunted and talk to the spirits just to let them know what is going on. You know, we run that, and trust me, it is a fine line on what we do. Okay? We are not using the ghosts for the sake of trying to call it a ghost hunt. Even though we call it a ghost hunt, what we are doing is we are breaking down the history of every building, and if the ghosts want to participate, they can participate. It is their choice. It's all about respect for them. It's all about respect for the spirits that still roam the Clydesdale barn or the house or even the land, for that matter. You know, we don't ask them to perform. We literally tell a story, and if they decide they want to join us, they can do that. A place like Waverly Hills, where I've never been, and I will fully admit that, but I know a lot of people who have, they are specifically trying to get people in there to contact the spirits. That's what they are promoting. They are working those spirits for the sake of the mighty dollar. And I think that's where the fine line and the difference is.
So I would still like to get Everett's opinion on the first question here, if I could.
You know, I think the idea of a code of ethics is a great idea in theory, but putting it into practice is impossible, because every one of these groups that pops up for a while says that they're going to have a code of ethics, and they write these things, and they may even attempt to follow them. But overall, there is no standard. And Eric, you had referenced TAPS before. They are almost the perfect example of how a code of ethics can go horribly wrong, because their first season or two, they used to talk all the time about how they have these standards and these procedures, and they're not going to do this and they're not going to do that. And then as their seasons progressed, whether to play to their own self-importance or their own audience, they basically broke every rule that they set up themselves and promoted and said that they were going to follow. I think we're a long way off from having a quote-unquote governing body. I don't think that that's going to happen for a long, long time. But what can happen is groups like Forest Moon, and there are some other ones, can set up their code of conducts or their code of ethics and then encourage other groups to come under their wing and begin to follow their standards, and slowly retrain the people who have grown up on these different shows thinking that, you know, ghost hunting is all about excitement and adventure and they're going to do it this way. Retrain those people into how to do it the right way. And I think that's going to take time. And I almost think that has to happen before we'll get any true governing body. I mean, there are organizations out there that groups or people can join that are kind of legitimate, but they don't do anything. There are several groups out there that they could be taking the lead on this. And I mean, like the, Rhine, and there's some other ones, the Association of Parapsychology. They are almost silent. I don't even know if they're taking membership anymore or if they exist. And, these groups kind of fall to the side. But I think we're a long way from having it done officially, but I think there are a lot of groups out there that could come under the wing of like Forest Moon and learn to do it right. And I think that would be probably a huge step.
Well, and that's the
I
thing.
agree with you. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I do the same thing. I have teams that I know personally and have worked with all over the U.S. and even Australia, some other places, and we have our own networking situation. But the problem is that even bringing in people on your ring, it seems like it again is great in theory, but a lot of people are not interested in signing up under something like that. I think a lot of it has to do with people's egos. Everybody in this field is in competition. They don't want to work together. All of their information they want to keep to themselves. Uh, they don't seem to play well with, others and just kind of want everybody's, there is no kind of standards in this field. Everybody's got their own ways of doing things, their own way of thinking about things. And it's just so out of whack, the whole thing right now. I mean, again, as I said, for 10 years, I've been not only talking but working with other, you know, um, well-known large groups to do something just like you're talking about, ever is bring people under your own groups. But the problem is then you might have those, you might have a few. I guess it's a starting place, but it just seems like when you start bringing teams together, a lot of them just cannot get along. There's just so much chaos in this field right now. It's just ridiculous.
And I'm gonna throw this out there, but I think setting a standard. I mean, we have our own standard. That's a given. But I think setting a standard to an extent has to depend on what your purpose of your team is. If your purpose is to find out what the paranormal is, that's one thing. And that usually stems from one, either people that have an experience, they have near-death experience, whatever, and they're curious. And that's respectable. The other ones just want to make a name for themselves, get a TV show, yada, yada. Whereas we're not here, Forest Moon's not here to prove anything. We're here for the emergency response side of it. And that makes it a little bit different because we're not running in to take pictures and get an EVP. We really don't give a damn. We already know it's there. We know something's there. We got to find out what it is. And that's usually what the astral team does. So setting a standard, we have a pretty strict standard just because we deal with people in crisis. We deal with kind of a more hairy side of things, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. Whereas if you're just out there for a picture and an EVP, other than respecting someone's privacy because you're in their home, confidentiality, that kind of thing, I mean, not going to a location on any kind of intoxicant or whatever, those would be your main concerns.
I kind of wanted to put in a little bit of clarification here too. Is that a lot of people, a lot of teams, and I've even heard it when the question was asked of some other teams. They think that when you're talking about doing a code of conduct, that you're going to say to everybody, you have to investigate this way. And I think that's not what we're getting at so much. Is that we're not talking about how you investigate necessarily. So I'm not telling you that you have to use this equipment or you have to use these psychics or you have to do this or you have to do that. What I am saying is that this is how you present yourself when you investigate. That is the key ticket that everybody needs to get their head around, I think, is the fact that every team, person, psychic, however it is, may have a certain way that they investigate. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as it's not damaging anything or screwing anything up. But it is how you present yourself when you do this investigation. And like Cooper said, it's one of those things where it's, you're not drunk, you're not high, you're not on anything. You go to investigation. Rule number 1, bing, right there at the top. There's nothing there saying that how you have to investigate. It's just saying that you present yourself in a professional manner when you do that.
I think
let me
that's.
jump to
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
You
was
get the final thought. You get the final thought on this, and then we'll jump to Charles' question real quick.
I was just going to say that I think that's even harder to enforce because you have such a varied pool of investigators, and you have people who may honestly believe that they are going to be like one of the TV shows, but then you have other people who may approach it from a more academic point of view, may even have a more professional appearance. I think the whole idea of that is, again, you would think that if it's just covering that, we wouldn't need one because everybody would have enough self-respect and respect for other people that would just be a given. Does that make sense?
It does, but it doesn't seem to happen that way.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, real quick. Charles got a question, and this changes the topic, but do we think the veil is getting thinner?
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
I don't believe in it.
You don't believe in the veil?
No. No.
I've kind of, at first I was on board with there is no veil because of the fact that we didn't see a rise or fall on cases. We always have probably about a minimum of 5 cases a day, and that's not an exaggeration. My morning starts from my laptop, and my laptop, depending on the day, right away has 3 cases waiting, and then it goes from there. But I've heard from 2 different sources that the veil is thinning, and one came from an alien race, the other came from a group of fairies. And not even to be funny, both sides are saying the veil is thinning. Is that why we're seeing more demons? And I'm not saying that to be funny. We've seen 2 different potential demonic cases. One was today, and that was a demonic case, which is rare. I want to clarify that. True demonic cases are extremely rare. But I want to hear your perspective, though, Christina. What do you know about the veil?
Well, I mean, just as not only as a psych medium, but just people that I work with. I work with children and teenagers with psychic abilities. And I do believe 100% that the veil is thinning. Becoming more connected. We're seeing more people's abilities are being activated. We're seeing many more cases, and just the shift that we're going through right now with people with abilities is very, very prominent, very apparent that something is shifting and going on. But I would definitely, again, dealing with people as the veil is thinning, people's abilities are getting stronger. It's part of the awakening process, and we've been going through it, for a few years where the veil has been thinning, that I've been super aware of it. But I 100% believe it is thinning.
Is it thinning because it's a physical barrier, or is it thinning because more and more people are beginning to accept the paranormal as normal?
Yeah, I believe.
I'm a classically trained scientist who fully acknowledges he lives in a haunted house. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no other, and I can't be the only one.
Right.
So
I agree.
Do you think that once the paradigm shifts, that the more people who, kind of like what gave the old gods their power, belief, are we creating a new form of deity or a new type of God energy by everybody believing in this stuff now?
I absolutely believe that can be part of it.
I have a thought that adds to that too, and it was discovered in 1954 by a scientist by the name of Schumann, there was a resonance to the planet. It's called the Schumann resonance, and it's basically the planet's vibrations. And I'm kind of the thought that with the spikes that has been in that resonance in the last, what's it been, about 6-7 years, we've started seeing spikes, and especially this last year. Schumann resonance usually sets at about 7 hertz roughly. It's measured in the ELF scale. And in 2017, this year, it actually spiked to 112 hertz. So I'm curious as to if there is some correlation between thinning a veil and these spikes.
Definitely could be. Definitely could be.
Okay, so we have a follow-up question from Craig. What is the veil?
That's a good question. I think we have to answer that before we can say whether or not we believe in it or not.
So the veil
don't you
is
think
kinda
it might just be? Don't you think it's just like a phase shift, or it's a frequency of existence, maybe?
I would say it's more like a vibration.
Yeah, frequency. Yeah, okay.
Curtain. Right. It's kind of like a vibration, and it separates the dimensions. So if the veil collapses, you're going to see demons more all the time. You're going to see some alien races because they're interdimensional. You're going to see spirits. Just think of Ghostbusters, and I hate referring to that, but think of Ghostbusters when that portal was essentially open and all the spirits came pouring out. That's the easiest thing I could think of to explain what would happen if the veil collapsed.
But if the veil collapsed, now Eric Markham lives in a haunted house. If that veil collapsed, do the ghosts in his house just continue to do what they've been doing, but he can see them? Or how does the interaction occur? What would happen?
That one I'm not sure how to answer.
Because I go back and forth. I'm not sure I really believe in the idea of a veil. I kind of agree with Markham in that I believe that as people become more familiar and open to the ideas, they're more aware and they see things and they sense things and they can essentially attract things to themselves. I have a hard time grasping that there is like whether it be a metaphysical or physical or invisible barrier. I just don't know that it goes along with the idea of different dimensions so much as being, we always talk about dimensions being vibrational. I think I have a hard time grasping the idea that there's something that can just stop that.
Right. And Donna is part of our astral team. She's in the chat room. And she's saying there would be a whole lot worse than the ghost. And she's absolutely right. Markham's spirits would be the least of your concerns. I wouldn't be worried about the spirits. Because you're thinking, you got to understand a whole lot worse. Think of your darkest fears would be released.
Well, let's look at my office as a perfect example. You guys came in and took care of a few things in there. That was slowly escalating. After the shows, on Spaced Out Radio, we would have our post-show calls, and I think Eric and Dave can tell you that there were times where I would literally have to leave the building. It was just, there was this feeling, and it just kept getting worse and worse until finally last week there were a couple instances where I just decided it was too much and had enough, and that's when you guys came in and fixed it. And it is an entirely different feeling in the building. So, if there's a veil do those spirits just get pushed back to the other side of the veil to come back again at another time, or how does that work? Because like I said, I'm having a hard time, and I go back and forth grasping the idea that there is a physical barrier or metaphysical or any kind of barrier, really.
This is my thoughts on it, and I'm obviously a little newer to some of this field than some of the rest of you, but it seems to me that the veil, if it's there, and I can neither prove it is nor that it isn't, it's kind of an energy barrier. And when we're talking about spirits and entities of this sort, we're talking about spirits and entities. This is all energy. And this would be a barrier of energy that is unfortunately getting a bit thinner or weaker. And it's allowing some of these spirits to be more easily able to get through it. Because we've always talked about that, for a spirit to manifest, it takes a certain amount of energy for them to be able to do it. And a lot of times they'll take energy from electrical stuff, your batteries and your equipment when you're investigating all different types of things. And, if this veil is a barrier of energy and it's getting thinner, that's a reason. I would say that would be a good reason why we're seeing a bit more than we usually do. And I agree that if it isn't there, if it wasn't there, I think there's probably a lot worse stuff that would more easily be able to come through.
But can I throw something out there, if you don't mind?
Please do.
Of course. The one thing that I have learned about the paranormal industry and the paranormal field is we are always looking for something to blame. We always have an excuse rather than trying to humanize some sort of topic here. Could we not be using the so-called veil as this next excuse that's out there in regards to why certain things happen? Like I said at the beginning, I'm not a big believer in this veil, so to speak. And probably the biggest reason why is all we hear are excuses as to why things are happening. We're not proving in this industry what is going on. We're not proving to find the answers of life after death or where aliens come from, where is Bigfoot real. And yet we always seem to have an excuse as to why things are going that way. And that's probably the biggest reason why I don't buy into this whole veil thing.
Well, I don't think that the veil thing, I don't think as it's thinning, it's bringing in more negativity or more negative entities, things like that. For me, it's more of an awareness type situation than it is I think we have more activity and darker activity due to all of the investigating and people not knowing what they're doing, opening portals, bringing in things that they don't understand. For me with the veil, it's just like, all right, so everybody that is born has psychic abilities. So it's not, I've never believed that, I'm somebody special that God chose to, put on this earth. And, I don't believe any of that. I believe we all have psychic abilities. And I think as the veil is thinning, it is kind of uncloaking things that are going on, so people are more aware. It's also activating or heightening people's abilities where they may not have been so strong before. Maybe they weren't seeing things, maybe now they are, different things like that. That's what I feel the veil is. Not so much as it thins, it's going to push away, the regular spirits and now bring in all this darkness. I mean, although we are seeing an increase in dark cases, but again, I feel that stems from a lot of people investigating that don't have a clue of what they're doing and are bringing about a lot of this. I mean, we see from the certain shows, and I mean, I talk about them on my show all the time, but I won't mention them here. But certain shows that do a lot of provoking, and I had plenty of, talked to plenty of investigators and things, and when we ask them about, where they learn what they're doing, it's off of these television shows. They do a lot of provoking, a lot of things like that, and I think that's driving a lot of what's going on.
But how does that affect this whole veil thing? Okay, what people are doing and what you're mentioning is absolute stupidity. We know that there are people acting completely moronic when it comes to not respecting the field of the paranormal. That has nothing to do with some imitation veil.
No, that's what I'm saying. The veil and opening portals and bringing darker stuff in are two different things. Again, I feel like the veil is just kind of a cloakness of awareness. And as it's getting thinner, people are becoming more aware. It's more apparent. I don't think that, again, it's manifesting anything dark just because the veil is thin.
And that does make sense. Now, I think possibly a rise in dark cases could also be the negativity of society in this day and age.
True.
Negativity brings in negativity.
Indeed. Okay, so let's go to the next person's first question. How about you, Christina?
Well, I wanted to talk about a little bit of ask the question, I guess. Do the rest of the people on the panel feel that paranormal investigating, especially without really knowing what you do you feel it can be a very dangerous situation that could literally put not only the investigator but the clients in danger?
I think that's hands down, especially with what we do in the astral and the stuff we deal with. But that's where your protection comes in. And I mean, even Dave, I know you've had people on your show where, well, I don't need no protection. I'm a tool. Well,
right.
Yeah, you are.
Literally.
Yeah. And, you go into a case without protection, whether you're shielding, whether you've got an amulet, whether you've got your belief system, you need that. Or you're going to walk home with an attachment. And not only are you going to walk home with an attachment, but you might put your client at risk by bringing other stuff out. And, so, yeah, there's a lot of dangers, whether they're metaphysical, paranormal, or even, just even as you walk into a barn and trip on a board. I mean, there's a myriad there's a plethora of dangers in the paranormal field.
Drink.
And it's even in our code of conduct where if you walk in and there's a carbon monoxide alarm going off, or if one of our meters goes off and there's black mold, we're going to stop the investigation and call the appropriate authority, whether it's the fire department for a monoxide detector or the health department for black mold, with the approval of the client. There's a lot of dangers in what we do, and not even counting the paranormal side.
Right.
I myself, I use stones and different things, saging, different things as for protection myself. Because the bottom line is the last thing you want to do, especially if you got a family at home like myself, you don't want to bring anything home with you. You don't need that problem. So it's very important to make sure that you're protected. These guys that say that they don't need any protection, they are nuts, straight up nuts. A lot of people look at us for what we do and think we're nuts. Now we're doing pretty good. People who think they don't need protection going into an investigation, they're crazy.
And it happens a lot, actually.
Well, and let's look at I hate bringing it up again, but let's look at paranormal TV. Do they show any of those teams that are on TV doing anything before they go into an investigation, saying a protection prayer? wearing an amulet that's, or making it obvious to the viewers. I'm using this red jasper to protect me. I'm using this black tourmaline as a negative absorber. I've done shielding before we came in. And do they do anything to cleanse themselves before they leave the location? No, they don't. Right. I have yet to see any paranormal TV shows remotely tell people about the dangers of it.
Right.
But Eric, do you think that has to do with the idea that so many of these paranormal investigators come into it with that idea of they're doing science, so they're not going to do the spiritual aspects of cleansing or anything like that because it might give the appearance that they're not doing science?
Oh, sure. Hit my trigger word there, Everett. Hit my trigger word. Damn you.
But to me, that's ignorance. Because whether you're there for quote unquote science or not, you should still know the dangers of what you're going into. Whether you're just going in there to get an EVP or an EMF reading, or any other scientific data that you're trying to acquire, you should still know what the dangers are. And if you did know what the dangers were, you'd know the importance of protection before you go into the location.
Okay. And even if you do protection before you go in, that's not always a guarantee that something isn't going to happen. I mean, I'm very, very aware of, doing my protection and all the different things that I do before investigating. And a few months ago when I was doing an event in McMinnville, Oregon, I did my protection and I was attacked by an entity in the basement. Literally pushed me so hard that it went through me and knocked me out. But from the witnesses that were there, said whatever this thing was literally picked me up off the ground, levitated me, and threw me about 3 feet across the room, where I passed out and woke up on the floor. And I woke up having handprints on my chest, the whole 9 yards. So I think part of it was because I had been ill. So, being ill, even putting your protection up, especially as a psychic medium, being ill and investigating, it's, like your protection shield is got, cracks in it. And so it sometimes doesn't work very good. So people have to be careful, again, even with protection going in there are things out there that if they want to get you, they're going to do their best to get you. And so I think that people need to have some sort of protection regimen when they investigate, as well as for their team. Because again, there's nothing worse, and I see it happen more often than not. I've had plenty of clients that were previously paranormal investigators, and they ended up becoming the client.
Right. Now let's talk about the astral team. We have a completely different set of guidelines for the astral team. For example, one, new people will always be teamed up with a more experienced individual. Two, nobody goes anywhere by themselves, and that goes for the physical and the astral. Three, once they're done location, headquarters is completely shielded, so they come here before they go home. So if there's any energy trail for any kind of entity or anything else to follow them, it won't find their home. So, I mean, we have a whole different protocol just for the astral versus boots on ground.
All right, so we hit Dave's magic trigger word. I'm curious to hear the rant. Let her rip, Dave.
Oh, you know what? You're just setting me up. There is no science in what 98% of the paranormal teams are doing out there. You have to get that word out of your vocabulary, people. You have to get that word out of your vocabulary, because unless you are in a controlled environment, you are not conducting science. And I learned this from Eric Markham. Him and I have talked ad nauseum about this topic for umpteen dozen hours. And we both realize that there is absolutely no way that these people who say they are conducting science, that they're conducting anything of the sort. Okay? They can sit there and they can say, oh, I'm conducting a scientific experiment. Okay? How? Tell me about what you're doing to control your environment, number one. And number two, are you eliminating theories because you do not believe in them? Or are you actually practicing and eliminating them by a virtue of scientific study? Now, if you look into the cryptid world, we have a whole group of people who are out there basically saying, we conduct scientific experimentation to prove what Bigfoot is and whether or not it exists. But we don't believe First Nations people. We don't believe people who have had interdimensional contact because that's not scientific. Well, the last time I checked, science was theory. Science is theory. Therefore, how can you eliminate a process or a theory if you have not even investigated it? So it's crap all around. We got a bunch of people out there who haven't done a true scientific experiment since grade 8 or 9 high school, running around saying, oh, I'm a cryptid scientist. You know, shut up. Shut up. You are not. And stop insulting the people who are doing good work.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, you know, unless you've got a degree in science and you are a scientist by trade, such as Mr. Markham, there is no way that you're conducting science. You're playing with toys. The bottom line is, I mean, when I walk into someplace, I'm using technology. I'm playing with a toy to see, if I can get a contact.
Corey, I agree with you on that, but let's not forget, just because I may build birdhouses out of my house doesn't make me a carpenter. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people who have, you know, an interest in science who may not have that degree, but how many of them are actually in the paranormal or cryptid field?
Probably not
very many. Exactly. So we do have to be careful with that because there are people doing it. And that's why I say it's like 98%. But for the people out there who are literally trying to throw the word, like all these TAPS groups out there, okay, it's crap. It's absolute crap because they're not doing anything to help the field. They're not doing anything to help their own investigation. The only thing they are doing is trying to make their ego larger, and that's what it is.
Oh, absolutely. Ego is a huge problem in the paranormal field for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth there, Corey, because all they're doing is playing with technology. There's no science in that. If you want to do scientific theorem, you have to have 3 different groups at least go in with the exact same equipment to the exact same location and get the exact same response. And it goes into a lot more than that. I understand that, but that's the bottom line. Is it takes a lot to do actual scientific theorem, and they're not. They're playing with toys. Dave, what's your question?
All right. This is a pet peeve of mine since you guys fired me up. And Joe, yes, you are a scientist, and you should be the only people. I just want to respond to Joe Monk's comment in the chat room. Great hair, by the way, Joe. Fantastic hair. But the only thing that you should be offended of is not the comments we're making. It's these idiots out there who are claiming they are conducting science. Those are the people you should be offended by, not us who are calling them out on their BS. But here's my other pet peeve. And I am starting to see this more and more and more. What's the purpose of Facebook Live paranormal investigations? We have people, I watched specifically for this question tonight, I watched about 6 different Facebook Live paranormal hunts tonight. I saw everything from people trying to shoot their Facebook Live in an absolute dark room where you can't see anything, people running around with ripped and stained T-shirts, in someone's house. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And, if the paranormal field, in my opinion only, could find another way to give itself a black eye, it's Facebook Live. Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
I completely agree. And you don't know how many so in Forest Moon, I have a set for groups that do promos. Saturday is the day. That's it. But when it comes to radio shows, the only radio shows that go in Forest Moon are Spaced Out Radio affiliates. That's it. And you don't know how many times I've got Facebook Live and this group wants to do a YouTube of their event. No, deleted. And I get, oh my God, I get people so mad. Oh, I've been called Hitler and Napoleon. And you're a dictator. No, actually, I'm not. It's my group, and I will dictate what goes in the group. One, because Forest Moon is a family. Two, there's a lot of clients still in Forest Moon, and I want valid information. I hold that personally responsible. It's got to be valid and verified information before it's going to go in the group. And you going out getting an EVP in a picture, to me, is not valid information. So, yeah, you see too many Facebook Lives. You see too many YouTube videos of all these groups going out and doing an investigation of, oh, my God, of all places, Waverly Hills. Or, come on now. That's not doing a damn thing.
But it is a quick and easy way for somebody to stroke their own ego. Coming right back to that. It's a way that somebody can go and say, I did this and I made a video, and basically, make themselves feel more important, or, validate their work or whatever. Facebook Live is just a way for people to make themselves feel important or stroke their ego.
It's YouTube for Facebook.
Yeah, well, at least on YouTube, a lot of people are going to YouTube now to do the YouTube lives of their investigations, to try to bring in people to watch so that they can make money off of their videos. But again, I see a lot of people being majorly criticized and critiqued, because when you put yourself out there like that, and again, I've watched plenty of them that have teams that really don't know what they're doing, and all you're doing is sitting there yelling at the computer screen like you do when you yell at the television when you see the stupid things that they're putting out while they're investigating that don't make any sense. So a big part of it, I think, like we've been talking about, is the ego in the field. They can't get their own television show because everybody wants to be a star and everybody wants to have a television show. But since they can't have it, they figure that their little followings that they have on their pages or on YouTube is the next way to give them their fame.
So,
don't you think that's watering down the paranormal field?
Oh, absolutely.
So here's my thoughts on video. Okay. My thoughts on video as it should be used in paranormal investigation is you videotape to see if you can catch anything. 1. 2, you videotape so that you can review it later to see how your investigation went, how everybody carried themselves, so on and so forth. Videotape that way can also be used as a protection in case somebody says, oh, well, you did this and I'm going to sue you, and you can say, well, I've got video that says I didn't. Okay. But YouTube and Facebook Live, no, I agree with Everett. That is simply a ego-stroking act, period.
I agree.
Sometimes, in my opinion, anyway, it's often like the paranormal is secondary to the fact that somebody is in front of the camera. It's more of a, oh, look at me, and by the way, this is what I'm doing.
Exactly.
But if you're at least, but think about this for a second, though, guys. If you're going to put yourself on camera, okay, and you're going to represent your team, your group, your whatever, your state, your city, your credibility, dress the part. Okay,
Yeah, right.
dress the part. Don't go in there with a ball cap that looks like you just got finished working from underneath a car changing the oil. Don't go in there with ripped or stained T-shirts. You know, ladies, don't wear the baggy shirts and the Lululemon pants if it's not really your body type. Okay, create an image, create a source. Okay, a lot of people may not like the fact that I would say that. Okay, and it is a little bit callous, and I understand. But you know what? In the end, you have to be able to protect your brand. That is something that Everett is teaching me quite a bit of when it comes to what we are doing with SOR. Okay, the brand is everything. If you want people to take you seriously, you have to protect your brand at all times. Like I wrote in my blog the other day, I've created here's a little tidbit of insider information. I have created this image that I broadcast Spaced Out Radio out of Uncle Jimbo's cabin, and the cabin is beautiful and everything. Okay, nobody really knows that I actually have a studio set up in a corner part of my unfinished basement. Right? Nobody knows that. But it's
now.
They do now, and I don't. Well, I let it go in my blog that I wrote last week. Okay, but the whole point is, if you're not branding your image at all times, all you're doing is hurting yourself. And that's the way you present yourself publicly, the way you speak about your team. If you're going to do something on Facebook Live or on Twitter or Periscope or YouTube, do yourself the favor. Improve on what you are doing.
Yeah, anytime that I'm out in public, you know, if I'm representing Forest Moon Paranormal in any manner, I always do it in a very appropriate, professional type manner. You know, I'm always talking to people, you know, in appropriate manner. You know, I'm not screw this, F that, you know, rah, 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 rah. You know, I'm talking to them in an appropriate manner. You know, I'm discussing with them whatever issue it is that they have and saying, look, you know, this is, if you need some help, this is a good private way to have it taken care of. And I emphasize the private. You know, we have strict privacy laws on what we do. So, you know, I'm constantly, you know, if I'm representing the brand, I'm representing it in a professional manner.
Well, and as
And
investigators, we always are, you know, videotaping, trying to capture evidence, things like that. But doing these Facebook Lives, again, I see a lot of people who are doing these Facebook Lives at private clients' homes. And I have a real problem with that because I feel like when you know, it's one thing when you're going to a public location, a known haunted location. It's a different when you have a private client. And like with us, it's always confidential. Like I would never do a Facebook, like I do use the YouTube Live and stuff from different events that I'm at or something, bits and pieces of it. But I would never do one from a private client's home. I mean, most clients, you know, want it to be confidential. They don't want this information, you know, just out to all of their friends and relatives, because even though they're convinced something's going on in their home, again, it's still, for some people, it's very taboo, depending on maybe their belief systems or whatever. So for these teams to go in and make the client believe that this is just part of how paranormal investigators and teams do things, it's absolutely, I think it's just an invasion, and I don't think that people should be doing that from private clients' homes. That's
no, and you know, we have Forest Moon T-shirts. I wear mine around town. That's promotion. When it comes to a client's house, not only are they violating confidentiality with their live, you know, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, whatever, from a client's home? Oh no, most of the clients we get, they're terrified to even approach us, let alone for me to be a Facebook Live in their home. And when it comes to our T-shirts, I'm not going to advertise who we are when we pull up to their house, because most of the time they don't want their neighbors. They got a paranormal team at their house. So, no, the T-shirts stay either not worn or covered up completely. Because again, yeah, look at me. I'm a paranormal vet, whatever. These people are terrified. They just want they just want their home back. They want their family safe. That's it. They don't want to be broadcast. So,
I agree.
Okay, so Eric Markham, what do you got for a question?
Well, say that you were able to definitively prove either the existence of a cryptid, the existence of, ETs flying. Take your favorite flavor of paranormal entity or theory, and you're told that you can have ironclad proof of the existence of or the non-existence of. Not, no, you just didn't find it. It's, you will, your wish is granted. Is there a Nessie? Yes or no? That kind of thing. What would you pick? What would you want to, what's that one thing out there that you'd want to prove it either existed or it didn't exist, and then you could move on?
A flash.
I think for me it would be ghosts, flat out. Just because that has more ramifications in my life or in the average person's life than if Bigfoot is out wandering in the forests. I think for me anyway, it would be definitive proof of ghosts or life after death kind of thing. That's
interesting. That's pretty much what I had thought, because it could be like throwing away a wish, It's like, I want to prove there's Bigfoot. Sorry, there isn't one. If you pick a cryptid. Where, like you said, if you've proven a ghost exists and prove what it is, that opens up a whole new, that gives you a whole new paradigm to consider.
For me, I would have to say, even as much as I like spirits and everything else, I would say aliens. And I have multitude of reasons for that. One is, and this is just purely for my amusement, I'd like to see the religious sect crap their pants. But two is, I would like to see, everybody out there have a real eye-opening to a lot of what is going on that has to do with aliens, a lot of the control that happens with some of the government and high officials, and just different things that happen that are all related to the aliens and the issues that are going on.
Well,
totally agree.
For me, being that I can already interact with spirits, so I know that, they exist. So I don't know that I would be looking at that. And but for me, I have always, I've been researching for probably 30 years about chupacabras. And I would love if I was able to prove that creature actually exists, opposed to, what the mainstream media puts out about them.
And
but by the same token, though, the question is, you will either know for sure and have definitive proof that they exist, or you will know for sure and prove that they don't exist. If you go into it with that prove existence and it turns out they don't exist, that they're totally mythological, how are you going to feel? So you don't get the answer you want. It's like, sorry, that one, better luck next time. How would that make you feel?
I would be okay with it. Again, I've been researching chupacabras and, in all different aspects of the paranormal for a very, very long time. And although there are many reportings I've done many interviews with people who have had animals drained of their blood and all these different things, and they say it's a chupacabra. But I can't find any actual validation to, prove or disprove that they exist, or is there a different, explanation? So for me, as a researcher and an investigator, either way it goes, I mean, that's what I'm looking for is answers. And if the evidence points that there's an alternative reason for or explanation, so be it. At least for me.
I'm going to go in left field here. Ordinarily, I'd probably say aliens. But I would say Slender Man. That would be my answer.
Good one. Yeah, I kind of like the idea of either putting that one to rest or...
Right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I want to change my answer because I was just...
Oh, you cannot. You cannot.
Too late.
Because yours was boring. Just because yours was boring.
I'm a woman and I can change my mind. But
that's true.
It would absolutely, I think, for me, be Black-Eyed Children. Because I had
that would be cool.
Ooh, yeah.
I had an encounter a few years ago with 2 black-eyed children and a black-eyed adult. And to this day, I am still baffled by what happened. I mean, it's been put in my story's been put in David Weatherly's book on this, Nick Redfern's book on this. And even though I've experienced it, again, there's no concrete proof. So I absolutely think it would be Black-Eyed Children.
Now, for me, it's Dogman.
Huh?
For me, it's Dogman.
Dogman.
Oh, Dogman.
Oh, yeah. I like that idea because, where was Dogman 30 years ago?
Right.
It's only been recently it's become a catchphrase. I mean, it went from one beast on Bray Road to now Dogman is everywhere.
Right.
Well, I will tell you this, and Christina, I know you'll understand this as a sensitive. Everybody who listens to my show knows my stories. I've seen Bigfoot. I've been around aliens. I've been around ghosts. Okay, I've seen shadow people. I've had a lot of crap happen that I'm not sure I would wish upon my worst enemy. But when you've been around it enough, you pick up on the energy senses of what is benevolent, what is malevolent, what's the difference between a spirit and a cryptid, and going all up to an extraterrestrial. The energy is different. The feeling is different. But last year, I mean, much like you, preacher, who can't, who needs to solve that riddle of the Dewey Lake monster, last year when my wife and I went out to get firewood, we came across a logging road that we went down, and it was energy that I had never felt before. It was uncomfortable. It was uneasy. It was scary. And it was nothing like I had ever felt. And the only thing that kept on popping into my head, and if I use my first gut instinct, is Dogman. Even though up until I got a report last week, Dogman had not been sighted in British Columbia. And then lo and behold, like a day or two later, after we were talking about it on SOR, I get an email from a gentleman about 5-6 hours north of me saying he just ran into Dogman. And is it coincidence? Could be. Could very well be. But we're checking out that story as we go. But the energy I felt along that road, and I've never felt it before, never felt it since, even when I've gone back down that logging road, was that there was something absolutely hideous. I don't want to say evil, but with evil tendencies, and something that could scare the daylights out of me, just out of my sight lines that I couldn't see. And so Dogman, I would like to actually, if I could pick one thing that I could see again, as much as I want to see Carl the Alien, I would love to see a Dogman.
Yeah, the energy is definitely a big thing, because when I saw the black-eyed children, the whole scenario was just really, really weird. And the fact that I have grown up and always been able to see, hear, and communicate with the spirit world, I'm really not afraid of too much. Like, not too much scares me when I'm doing cases. But I will tell you, whatever it was about these black-eyed kids, the energy it literally petrified me. I have never been so scared and so confused and ever before. I mean, it was again a very, very crazy. But yeah, the energy, once you are very connected, where you can sense and feel and read the energy, yeah, it definitely changes depending on what you're around.
Well, I want to go back to your answer real quick, Christina, because everyone's heard of the black-eyed children, but you mentioned black-eyed adults.
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
Well, so I was coming back from an abductee's case. He had a implant, and so we went, and we actually had a lot of crazy stuff go on while we were at the client's house out of town. When we got back, I ended up went home. Me and my roommate went out to go get some food. When we came back, we lived in a cul-de-sac, and it had like a little offshoot street, dead end street, and I lived in a little tri-story house right at the end, up to a greenbelt. It's very secluded. Nobody goes there. Know everybody in the cul-de-sac, everything. And when we drove up to the house, there was 2 children and an adult. And again, this is why it was very confusing, because these are not the normal types of cases or reportings that you hear with black-eyed children. So when we got home, we pulled up the 3 of them. So there was a Caucasian woman. She had like blondish brown hair. It was all curly, kind of like, it looked like, like a tiger mane. And it was unkept. She had clothes on that were all wrinkly. Then there was a African-American little girl. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9. She had shorts and a shirt on, but they were mismatched. Again, wrinkled. She was very pale, even though she's African American. She's very pale, and I wanted to say even looked like she had really dry skin or something. She was very, very light. And then there was a little boy, and this little boy skin was white as milk. He had like almost blondish white hair. And he had these, and this is again, had these blue eyes. I could see his eyes when we pulled up. He had blue eyes. The other 2 had brown eyes. And my roommate asked me, who they were. I didn't know. So he got out of the car to basically ask them what they were doing on our property. And he walks out there, and I see he's got his hands on his hips. And then he says something, and to the woman, says something back to him. And all of a sudden, I'm watching, and his hands just dropped to his side. He turned around, walked back into the car, got into the car, never said anything, kept his eyes focused, drove into the garage and put the garage door down and started to get out of the car. And I was like, he was so upset about these people being here. At first, like, why is he so calm? I was like, what's going on? What did they want? And he said, don't worry about it. They're just looking for lost feral kittens. And I'm like, lost feral, like, that doesn't even make any sense, and like, and it was in that kind of very monotone, just robotic voice. And at that point, he just got up and just went downstairs to his room. And I'm thinking, what in the world? So I come in the house and nothing's making any sense. And I just have this really, really weird feeling. So I decide to go be the nosy investigator that I am. And I decide to go and look out my shutter blinds, and at this point I see the people there. All 3 of them are standing on the side of the greenbelt, the mountain that goes down to the creek, and they're facing away from me. They got their backs to me, but as I look out, it was if they knew I was looking, because all of them at the same time turned from like their waist and then turned their heads back to look at me. And the thing was, it wasn't that far away, but I could now see, especially the little boy that was very, very fair skinned. He no longer had blue eyes because they were like a piercing blue. It wasn't like, just an average blue. These were super, super, super blue that stood out. And all that I could see was these big black eyes, no whites of the eyes, no nothing. And so I literally, it scared me to death. I jumped back. I ran downstairs to go and get my roommate because I figured, okay, I've got to have somebody that's going to be a witness and validate what I'm saying. So I run down, banging on his door. I hear the water running in the shower, and I'm thinking, why in the world would he get in the shower? So I'm banging and banging and banging. He doesn't answer. So I go back upstairs, and I decide to look outside again. This time, they're back on my front lawn, and they are by a tree, and they're in a circle holding hands, and they're kind of swaying back and forth. And now I can see the woman's mouth moving, but I couldn't make out what they were saying because I had the door closed. And again, just as if they knew I was looking at them with their backs turned to me, they all turn and look directly at me. Again, at this time, I'm so freaked out. It was literally sending like an energy that was so petrifying. I jumped back, almost fell down the stairs, go try to get my roommate again, still no answer. So I'm literally having like this crazy woman conversation with myself of, oh my gosh, Christina, what are you doing? Like, what in the world are you scared of? This is what you do for a living. If people knew that you were this scared, they would be so disappointed in you. Put your big girl panties on and go out there and ask them what the hell they're doing. So I did. And so I grabbed the handle, I yanked the door open, I went outside and I said, hey, what the hell are you doing over there? And at that point, they all dropped their hands that were holding. The lady looked at me and these big black eyes still, and she said, nothing, we're done. And they all started walking off. And I'm standing there like in shock, like processing, like, you're done? Done with what? What the hell did you just do? And so I literally go running up my walkway towards my, on the side of my house to where the garage is. And as I look around the corner, there's nobody, not one of them. And I know that like this has only been a few seconds. There's no way they could have even took off running. So to be sure, I grab my keys and I get ready to go. And as I'm grabbing my keys, my roommate was coming up the stairs. And so he said, I grabbed him and he said, I was talking a mile a minute and he couldn't really understand what I was talking about. And so we get in the car and we drive the little cul-de-sac. We ask the neighbors. Nobody has seen these people. And because the kids weren't like in hoodies, they weren't both white children. Then the fact that there was this black-eyed woman, which I had never, ever heard of a black-eyed adult in my...
No, not at all.
Right. And so I was pretty much, I didn't even want to say anything to anybody. Everybody on my team that had went to the abduction case came home and had some weird phenomena that was going on. So one of my team members called and was like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what just happened. And I'm like, oh, you're not going to believe what just happened. So of course my story took the cake of everybody else and topped it. But everybody was like, what do you think? Do you think they're black-eyed kids? And because all of my research all the research I could find on them I didn't see any, other races of children that were being seen, especially no women. So I basically kept it to myself. I had reached out to a mutual friend of mine and David Weatherly's, and I had said, I don't know for sure if I had an experience with black-eyed kids and an adult, but this is what happened. Is there any way you could check with David Weatherly? Because at the time, he was really the only one doing research on the black-eyed children, was very much in the out with his books and everything. And the guy called me back, my friend, and he said, oh, no, he said that, that doesn't make any sense. So I just left it alone. I'm like, okay, people will really think I'm crazy and think I'm lying if I come out with this information. So I waited for about a year, and I had went to a MUFON meeting, and David Weatherly, I found out, was going to be the speaker. And when he saw me, he was like, "Oh my gosh, Christina, like, we need to talk." And so I was like, okay. And come to find out, he was very interested in what I was saying. And it wasn't, he explained in the Black Eyed Children that there have been different reportings of children of different ethnicities, but he had never heard of a Black Eyed adult. And so I ended up reaching out to Nick Redfern, and he wanted to use my story as well. And that's how I found out through Nick and his research about the Black Eyed women. And so there have been many reportings of Black Eyed adults. But again, this was something a little different that I'd never experienced. And again, you know, when you look at the research, there's just a whole lot of speculation and reportings of what people think they are. So I really didn't have any real clue. But I will tell you, I've never felt fear like I felt during that encounter. And that has been something I've talked to many people now that have had Black Eyed Kids experiences, encounters over the years. And that seems to be one of the main common denominators, is that for whatever reason, these kids give an energy out that is literally petrifying, and people don't even know why. So it was very interesting. It stuck with me for sure. And we actually, David Weatherly had asked me if we had done any readings in the location that they were in the circle on my property doing the chant. And I said no. And what was weird is I didn't even think about that. So we went back a year later, and exactly just in that spot where they were at, the EMF readers were off the charts. So, you know, was it from that? Who knows? But it was definitely strange and interesting at the same time.
Can I throw a question out about Black Eyed Kids and Black Eyed adults?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that Christina said kind of perked my ears a little bit was that one minute the eyes were normal and then they seemed to be black. Yes. Like, you know, that's not the first time I've heard that. And I've always tried to figure out or wonder why. What is the purpose of these black eyes? Because I have heard reports where people are talking to somebody and it's almost like a cloaking device. They see for just a couple of minutes either these all black eyes or it'll be reversed. They'll be talking to or experiencing a black-eyed kid kind of experience, and this entity will have normal eyes for just a brief period of time. And I've always kind of wondered what the purpose of the black eyes specifically is. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Maybe it's just a mutation.
And my question with that would be, are they alien or are they some other form of entity?
I think it's some other form. I want to say that maybe even something interdimensional, more so than alien. But I mean, again, that is a theory, is that, you know, they are an alien being or a demonic type entity. So I'm not really sure.
If it could be a birth defect, where the iris is uncommonly large in the eye, or the pupil is uncommonly large, because they're usually seen at night. You know, people encounter them in the dark when the pupil would be dilated anyway.
Well, that's true, but this was in daytime at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and again, I could clearly see that each of their colors of their eyes. And then, you know, especially when you have, I don't know if you've ever seen anybody with just like these piercing blue eyes. You can see them on immediately. And I could see them, and the next minute that I was looking, there was no whites of the eye. There was no blue. It was completely black. I mean, it just looked like there was just two black sockets in there, you know, eyeballs in there. That you could not see any white. any of those things. So again, that doesn't make. And another interesting thing is that after this happened, my roommate had very little recollection of the whole situation, the conversation, and anything, which was kind of strange as well.
And that's another alien sign, though. I mean, I'm not advocating everything's alien, but some of the signs with the black-eyed children, and I guess now the black-eyed adults, you've got, the memory recollection erased aspect is alien. Some of the appearances are somewhat alien. So that's why my thought would be alien. Now, in reference to Markham's comment about has anyone ever attacked one, I've heard a case where, because they can't, so the stories go, they can't come into your home unless you invite them.
Right.
Same thing with the car. There were cases where black-eyed children, there were 3 of them, and there was a guy, he was parked, he went to his work real quick. He was in his car. They knocked on the window. They asked to come in. They asked if they could give him a ride. He felt leery. He felt terrified. And he said no. They got mad. One of them hit the car. Nothing happened to the guy. But, I mean, they do, in some cases, show, anger and maybe violence if you stuck around, if you tell them no.
Funny, you have to invite them in. So maybe these things have been around for a very long time, and that whole mythology with, you have to invite a vampire in or they can't enter your home. Could be a combination of the 2 myths. Or, but has anybody actually, just, poked one of them in the nose or something? Hit...
I've never heard of one.
Tried shooting them off the front porch. I don't know. You'd think if maybe they only pick on people who they know won't attack back. Maybe I don't know. It just seems like somebody somewhere would be short-tempered. Like if you want to get me out of the car and whooping your, anyhow, hit my car.
But it doesn't seem to work that way. I mean, the energy, it scares people so it's almost like paralyzes them. Like you can't react. That's the whole thing. The only thing that you feel is this overwhelming fear and panic. I
wonder if they're emitting some kind of infrasound.
Definitely could be. The fact that they knew I was watching them was interesting to me because they had their backs to me, but they could, as soon as I would look out and look directly at them, they would literally turn around and look right at me as if they knew I was looking. And when I was looking dead in their eye, I couldn't do anything. I just was sitting there scared to death. Like, what the world's wrong with me?
Has anybody ever looked at black-eyed kids as kind of I don't know exactly how to put this, as sort of like a Mothman entity where that fear is their purpose, whether it be to warn somebody or awaken somebody, but basically that is their purpose, is to generate that fear or create that fear?
I mean, I guess it could be.
Like harbingers, more of something that, like the banshee.
Yeah, kind of.
Something that's a warning spirit or... And
that's very possible.
Is there anything that's going on in your life at that time that might have attracted those things to you? You said something about an investigation. Everybody had something weird happen. Could it be you are exposed to a certain resonance or a certain energy that attracts them?
Well, that sounds kind of similar to Men in Black, too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's some similarities, too. The kind of weird, not quite right aspect of the Men in Black, like they don't really have a grasp on cultural norms or quite have a hang of the language.
Well, even when I saw them, again, the clothing, everything about them just stood out as peculiar. Because, like, again, I was trying to figure out maybe were this family homeless? You know, was she a foster parent? I mean, because, again, they all looked very disheveled. They had clothes that were completely mismatched, like, you know, some stripes and some flowers. You know, I mean, it was very odd. And again, the way that they looked, I mean, it was almost, they had no emotion, no nothing. Everything was very monotone and just very matter of fact. So again, it is always, you know, piqued my interest. It will be an encounter I will never forget, obviously. But I think there's we're starting to see a lot more reportings, but the problem is that a lot of times it's hard to tell if they're actual, cases, because sometimes, they're very similar and very similar reporting. Sometimes it's completely doesn't match up with anything that has been reported. So there's so many variants of them.
Okay.
Okay. So, who hasn't asked the first question yet?
Everett.
Does everyone ask one?
Everett needs to ask a question.
And I have a question. I've been listening to a lot of different paranormal writers' interviews on different shows, and it kind of came to a head the other night. I've noticed a lot of these people don't want to answer questions directly anymore. Even though they're there to promote their book or their appearance, they seem to just not want to answer questions. And I wanted to know, do you guys think that it has to do with maybe they just don't want to give anything away because the book market is so competitive? Or are they just, unprepared for doing interviews? Or is it kind of what we talked about before about people are getting into the field with like very little expertise or knowledge about what they're writing about, so they can't answer the questions? And I just kind of wanted your guys' opinion on that.
I think Craig hit it in the chat room with money and ego. Again, I think ego plays a big role in the paranormal. And I think with some of them, they just don't have the answer, and they don't want to admit it.
Yep.
But the thing is, if it's ego and they're there to promote themselves, you would think that these people would be either better prepared or have some answers that they're willing to give up. Because if you go on a show and you don't answer questions and you avoid them and you kind of have a smugness to you that you're not going to give up anything, what motivates me to buy your book or go see your appearance?
Right.
But you know what? If we get to the ego for a second on this, I have had authors literally tell me, David Paulides being one of them, that he will not come on the show unless I read his book. As a host, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not my job to read your book. It's not my job to sell your book. I am giving you a free platform in front of 140,000 people a night to advertise yourself. Sell yourself. It's not my job. My job is to come up with the topic. My job is to interview you on the topic. And my job is to make sure that you hit the questions, or I give you the questions that are relevant to your topic. My job is not to sell your book. And if you think that I'm out there for 3 hours a night to make you money, you got another thing coming. That's bullshit. Pardon my language, but it is. It's crap.
No,
I had,
totally.
like the gentleman we had on last night, he was upset that I didn't read his Kindle version. I work 16 hours a day. When do I have time to read? I look on my shelf right beside me. I think I've got 35 to 40 books from authors who've been on the show that I haven't had time to read. And there's ones that I want to read. I got books from Preston Dennett, who is a very good friend of our shows. I'd love to read his books. I can't. I have no time. But either way, the fact is, as my host, I'm giving you a format to sell your product. I'm giving you free airtime to people who are going to listen to it live, who are going to download the podcast, listen to it on one of our terrestrial radio stations or online radio stations. Okay, we're giving you the format. It's not my job to do your job. And if I'm going to be doing your job, pay me. Pay me, because my service isn't free.
Well, and the other thing, Dave, and I don't know if you get this as well. I mean, I get authors too that tell me, they want me to read their book. And many of the people I have, they will send me a copy of their book ahead of time in case I want to check it out or whatever at my leisure. But I've had other ones that want me to go and buy it. And I'm like, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to, do all that. I don't have time to read it before the show. And then and then I'll also have them send me a list of pre-planned questions that they want me to ask them. And that's not how I do my show. I don't do it like that. I ask whatever questions that the listeners want to hear.
Yeah, but Christina, that's the George Norrie way of doing things. Okay, George Norrie has started this lame-ass journalism thing where instead of actually being a journalist, he's asked all of his guests to write 25 questions or potential questions that he may ask during the show. Ronald Murphy confirmed that with me when he was on Coast to Coast. And, and that's where it starts. That's where it starts. A good host should be a prepared host, but they shouldn't be hitting up the person for questions. That's just sheer ignorance and no respect for your guest.
Yeah, and I've actually had guests tell me that if I don't go by their scripted questions and stick to only those questions and topics, that they won't do the show. And I'm like, so be it. Don't be on the show, because that's not how I do it.
Well, don't forget, look it up on Google. Is an answer.
Well, if they're providing questions, at least they're giving you something that they're willing to answer. Some of the stuff that I've heard, and Dave, this isn't just referring to, some guests that we've had. It's kind of a general thing I've begun to notice, is that I don't want to say that they're argumentative, or I'll go along with they're unprepared, but they just don't want to give anything away. And like you said, you're providing them a platform. You're providing them advertising. They should be willing to deal with whatever question any host may ask and provide an answer to the best of their ability to that question. And in that case, Eric, look it up on Google, should not be an answer.
Only as a technicality. No, my jaw hit the floor when I heard that. I had never, I was like, I can't repeat what I said. It just, I was like, did I just really hear that?
That's right. Yeah.
I think,
oh my God!
I think in the chat room I saw. I think I saw in the chat room for a brief moment was, why don't you Google why this guy's an effing a-hole? And then it got deleted, something like that. But I think that another thing that you said, Everett, kind of hits it on the head a little bit. Is I think there's a lot of these guys that may be writing, gals too, I should clarify there a little bit, that are writing these books, and they're taking a lot of information from here and from there, and they're writing their books, and they're putting it together, but when they come onto the show, they don't know this stuff because they don't know this stuff. This is all stuff they looked up from somewhere else or somebody else, and they put it together in a book with some of their own possible theories.
But even if they do that, they should know at least that material. But maybe that's why they only want specific questions. But for me, I want to ask the questions that they're not asking. Yeah, so I don't like to go by the scripted things. That, to me, it makes it seem like they have something to hide.
Yeah, some of the best guests that I have heard on Spaced Out Radio basically came on there, and Dave could ask them any question from his version of questions, any question from the chat room version of questions, and that guest could come up with an answer in right now, and had it and could fully explain it. And it was almost as if Dave didn't hardly even have to run the show. He just kind of guided it a little bit, and boom, it went. Those were some of the best guests I've ever heard of. But, you know, some of these other guys, like the one we had the other night, oh my God! You know, like I said, I came up with a title for these guys, and that they're the Google guest. You know, I could almost swore that by the way he was answering some of his questions, he was Googling it on the fly.
He probably was.
I would not hesitate to bet on that.
I'd almost like to read his book just to see what he has to say.
That's another thing. There was nothing given. I mean, he didn't give enough of an answer to even have a follow-up. Because he didn't follow. He didn't add. You know, he didn't answer the initial question. So it's like, what's a follow-up to Google it? Well, how about using ask.com instead? I mean, being facetious, but still, this is. Why would you bother coming on a show if you didn't want to talk about what's in your book?
And that's why I asked the question. And I will say Dave handled it spectacularly in that instance.
He showed what a pro he was by not just cutting the plug on that guy.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Dave's stellar with all his guests, though.
Oh, but like Eric, like you said, why go on to a radio show or a television show or do a magazine or newspaper interview if you don't want to talk about the product you're providing?
Yeah, that was one of the first guests I booked. He had a book out about, his experiences with a certain company. And I thought, well, that could be interesting because he also had something to do with chaos. He had a tie-in that when you read what he was talking about on his website sounded very interesting. But then when you get him on, so, well, I don't want to talk about, I don't want to give away the book, or I don't, if you're not smart enough to tease your book or to generate interest with the content of your book, just stay home.
Right. It's not like they're going to give away the whole book in the short interview that they're in. I mean, people give, like you said, little teasers and tidbits of information, and they'll say, if you want to, this is what was going on. If you want to hear what, the conclusion was, pick up the book or whatever. But there's lots of ways to promote your book on a radio show without giving away every bit of information in the book. And
without answering, that answer's in the book.
Right.
I thought Dr. Richard Spence came on, and granted this book has been out a long time, but the reason I read it the first time, and I think it's been like 10, 15 years ago, at least 10 years ago, is because the interview I heard him give on another radio show made me want to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It was, yeah. And I mean, I just met, when I wrote to him, I mentioned in an offhand way that when he agreed to come on the interview, that I had loved that book and that I had loaned it to a coworker of mine who quit without notice and never sent me my book back. And, bless his heart, he sent me a copy. So it was like, I felt he sent me a copy, I had the time, so I felt before he came on board that night, I had it for a week and a half, 2 weeks, I needed to read it again just to be prepared to co-host that night. Because like I said, that's 10 years ago, and I've read a lot of crap since then. But it was, he didn't shy away from anything. He brought things out of his book, it's like, and if you can, it's a very dense book because he's a history professor and he footnotes things and all that. So you couldn't give up that entire book on a radio interview. It was just too much information in it.
If a guest is afraid to give up any information that's in their book, it makes me wonder how much is actually in the book worth even exploring. If they're so afraid to give up a little tidbit here and there can't be very much in that book.
Right.
You got to wonder.
And I'm a very busy guy. I'll be honest. I've got a ton of stuff going all the time, and if you want me to read a book, you'd better leave me hanging in an interview to really make me want to go over and grab that book and sit down and go, okay, why did he say that? Why is that story that way? You'd better really entice me, because, when you're trying to promote a book, you're trying to promote a book to even guys like me that don't have time to really sit down and read a book. You've got to be able to sit there in that interview and be spectacular and be able to leave me with just enough information that I'm hung on it so hard that I have to grab that book and read it. And
there's got to be a hook.
There's got to be a hook, I mean, look at, I hate to say it, but look at television, well, they leave you with a hook, man. You got to watch that next episode. That's what you need if you want me to read that book. And I tell you what, man, that I guess the other night, nah, not even a chance.
Cliffhanger. Yeah.
I got something he can Google, and it ain't a book.
Right.
Well,
all right. Let me get to my. Let me get to my first question.
Yeah.
And it's going to come from my second pet peeve that happened today. So, and this question's going to lead to some other questions, and I know we'll wind up covering it all. But so, if you have a haunting or your home's haunted, you have a spirit, an entity, groups can go in and clear that. And they call that paranormal. But you have alien abductees that are going through just as much trauma, if not more, than someone that's being attacked by a spirit. But until recently, you can't stop an abduction. So this morning I got a message. One of my first messages when I opened the computer up, that one of our members in Forest Moon is in like 3 or 4. She has her own group and is in 3 or 4 other UFO groups, and has numerous people that have recently been coming up saying, "Look, I'm being abducted. What do I do?" So she was asking me, "What do they do?" And I let them know, well, we are recently being in combat mode with aliens. We are stopping abductions. That's what we've been doing. And so I put the message out because they wanted me to share Forest Moon on their group. And so I basically concocted a message, basically telling people, look, we're combating aliens. We're working on stopping abductions. If you feel like you've been abducted or know someone that has been, get a hold of me. So throughout the day, been getting people talking about it, whatnot, and had this individual actually scoffing and was, "Oh, you believe in aliens?" And basically tore our group apart because we believe in aliens. This is in a paranormal group. So my question is, where do these people come from? And two, if you can believe in ghosts and spirits, what makes aliens such a stretch? Anyone got a comment?
Aliens scare people. Okay. at least with the paranormal, there seems to be a lot of people out there who feel there is a sense of control. There is a sense of understanding. But with extraterrestrials, there seems to be this mental blockage that everything is malevolent, everything is evil. They're here to just rape and pillage and take whatever they need to get away from us. And that's where I believe it starts. And I think it's a fear factor that a lot of people don't really want to be able to discuss these topics or even get involved because it scares them. Or maybe they've even had their own experiences, but they're just not willing to talk about them.
Possible.
I think what you find with some of these guys, gals that jump into these groups and want to give you crap about aliens, whatever else, you'll find it's the exact same person who's giving somebody else crap about them having a problem with a spirit in their house. I think a lot of them come into, and it's easy to do on something like Facebook. It's extraordinarily easy to do. They come in, faking it off that they like ghosts or whatever else it is, and so they get accepted into a group, and then they just wait for an opportunity, and they have nothing better to do than just to pounce on somebody and just make them feel absolutely awful. The very thing that we're trying so hard to make sure that somebody doesn't feel, they're going after them to make them feel that way. Why is it? Sometimes it's religious. Other times I think there's just some people that are just hateful, awful people. And as much as I hate to say it, we all like to think that there's good in everybody. Well, I hate to tell you, but I think there's people that there isn't good in, and that's just the way it is.
This has also been a problem for a very long time that I've seen is, the genres of the paranormal, the supernatural are very separate. The people who believe in ghosts, spirits, demons, usually don't believe in the aliens, UFOs, cryptozoology. The people who believe in aliens usually don't believe in spirits and ghosts or demonic activity or Bigfoot. And Bigfoot or cryptozoology genres don't believe in aliens or the paranormal. Again, I mean, myself, I feel that they're all interconnected. I research all of them, and when you do broaden your research into other areas of the supernatural, you'll find a lot of similarities. But people are in such a little bubble of only focusing on just what they believe in, so there is no additional things that they want to be open to. So it always has made me laugh how people can say they believe in, ghosts and spirits, but they won't believe anything else, as if that can, exist, but not, the other things can't. So I think a lot of times it's, people are in these little boxes with their blinders on, and they only want to see the validity in the genre of the supernatural that they believe in. Everything else to them is, BS.
Let me interject here for just a second. Dave is getting pretty tired. He's been going for about 20 hours here, so I know he would like to get off here. So I'd like to take a moment and say thank you, Dave, for taking the time. We greatly appreciate it.
It was so much fun, and you guys know me better than anyone. I do apologize that I am going to be pulling out a little bit early here, but I do hope that you guys have a great remainder of the show. But when I'm pushing 16, 17 hours a day, all of a sudden it just hits me, and the tiredness caught up. So I do apologize. I do apologize, but so much fun, and I want to do this again. Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
Every third Saturday, Dave. Every third Saturday we're to be doing a roundtable.
Thanks, Coop. Appreciate it, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Dave. Good night.
Right. Sleep well.
Good night, Dave.
Okay.
I had a comment I wanted to make about what Christina just said. How does it help the paranormal field in general, though, when these people come out and pick on the other aspects of it? I mean, if let's say that you just believe in demons, or I'm sorry, in aliens, and I just believe in ghosts, how does it benefit me or you or the field if I degrade your beliefs or what you're studying?
Oh, it doesn't
at all.
No. and that's one reason our Paracon covers all aspects, because in my opinion, they're all related. They're all paranormal.
Absolutely. And again, if you really look at the research, if you research the, different genres, and, Coop, your group is a lot like mine. When you start getting reports of experiences and encounters from people in these different that are reporting, maybe contact or abduction, or interaction with a spirit, or even an encounter with a Bigfoot. When you start talking to all these different people, again, you start seeing similarities in the reportings. A lot of times people who have either had contact or abduction also end up having paranormal activity. People used to think that sleep paralysis was something that people would go through after they had been, abducted. But we also know in the paranormal, there are a lot of people who experience sleep paralysis as well. Now, I have precog dreams all the time, and a lot of times when I awaken from the precog dreams, I will be in full sleep paralysis. But again, there are a lot of similar reportings, and I think that if people would just, open their mind to the possibilities that this stuff could be all intertwined or have a lot to do with each other. But again, I am seeing progress. I am seeing more people, more groups that are now expanding and starting to research these other topics. But it's very, very slow, and it's crazy, again, to me, how somebody can be a hardcore fanatic and believer of aliens and UFOs, but yet they can't grasp that there could be spirits or, other entities out there. But again, I think that's a lack of knowledge, a lack of, investigating. I mean, you just really have to have an open mind when you're dealing with stuff like this, instead of saying I can believe in one thing, but I can't believe in the other, until you have some proof that, can disprove that these things exist. You need, I think, as an investigator, need to have, and a researcher, you need to have that open mind.
And completely. And then on the other end of that stick, I got into it with another individual that, and this is flipping just a little bit, but, the Greys are all good. And I'm like, really? Explain that to the, thousands of abductees I've been working with in the last 20 plus years. The Greys aren't good. And according to this individual,
maybe she got her information from Google.
Apparently, because this guy brought up the Galactic Federation. Well, the Greys joined the Galactic Federation. Like, really? So those weren't Greys that we were actually combating here about a week ago? They were Greys, and they sure weren't good. And, where do these people, seriously, where do these people come from? Google, I understand. And I think that's what another problem is. People go to Google and they find all these this plethora of websites that all get their source from the same. They get all their information from the same source, and so you also have all these people that, there's no bad aliens. Again, explain that to the abductees. If there's no bad aliens, well, they're just doing scientific experiments like humans do. No, actually. I actually had this other individual that said, well, it's just like going to the doctor. Huh? Really? Aliens are doctors now. No. So I don't know. Comments?
Well, in the case of doing scientific, I've had to collect specimens in the wild, and the dispassion at which most of the people doing the science, I mean, okay, case in point, go out during breeding season with the spotted salamanders. So in order to collect the data we needed, we basically interrupted these things right in the middle of them getting their once-a-year freak on without any, idea. Maybe what I'm getting at is maybe these aliens are so far above us or are arrogant enough to presume that we don't mind being interrupted in our daily lives. It's that we do it to what we consider lesser species without so much. And, if you find something odd or something strange, you drop it in a kill jar. So the precedent is there. We really can't get our moral high horses about that and pretend that we don't do the same thing to what we consider lower species.
But Eric, at the same time, while you may have interrupted their freak, there are other people, other scientists in our own race or species who may be nurturing or I don't want to say helping the salamanders, but they're not being dispassionate. They're being passionate towards the experiments and what they're doing to help that race. So even or help the salamanders. So even amongst us, you have two different paths or two different ideas. So to say an entire race of aliens would all be dispassionate or very clinical, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I was saying is that, these aliens that do the abductions that seem to be dispassionate, they might be of the camp that we are just merely these study subjects. Not like the scientists that go to Africa and try and keep the cheetah from going extinct, or there's a difference in mindset. I'm just saying, when you have the ET experiencer who talks about, didn't care if they caused pain, didn't care, that if the abductee felt like a piece of meat. We do that to, we as a species, as scientists, are, prone to do that. Look at the scientists that had the grant from the government, I forgot, hundreds of thousands of years, and basically all he was doing was crushing monkey skulls in a hydraulic press. So you've got that guy from another planet with a spaceship is the difference. He doesn't have to get monkeys sent to his lab. He can come to the lab where the monkeys are.
Right. Now, here's the thing, too, because back when I first got into the abduction and UFO scene back in the early 90s, you saw a difference from what you see today. Because back then, it was the gray hybrid program, and they were basically creating hybrids with gray DNA with human DNA and making hybrids. Now, abductees back then were reporting that if they showed fear or pain, the grays were showing empathy. And as weird as that sounds, they would actually come down and lock eyes with you, and you would start feeling peace. Now, today, along with the other differences that are going on, it seems to be the actual hybrids are doing the abduction, and they are cold, calculated, kind of scoffing, no empathy. So there's a difference in abductions going on today than they were, 20 plus years ago. So that's a big difference between the same race of what's going on today.
And so what was the question? I'm sorry.
No, that wasn't a question. It was a comment.
Okay. I thought you had a question out of that.
No. Just throwing in how scientists are cold and calculated from the human side.
Right.
And how the aliens are with us now. But, we have 16 different races that are abducting. Some we don't know what the object is. Some of them, are doing experiments, and some of them, well, the abductee doesn't come home. They don't come back at all because, well, they're eaten, just to be blunt.
But some of these abductions, I do believe, are being orchestrated by the government.
Well, those are my labs.
Okay. All right, so let's move on here. We're at just a little over 2 hours. How is everybody feeling?
Oh, we're going till we're going a 3-hour show.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
You still good? You still good, Christina?
Yeah, I'm still good.
Okay, just wanted to check. So,
Thank
all right.
you.
So I wanted to jump to my second question here, and it'll kind of go off in a little bit of a different direction here. So, and this is something that's always kind of puzzled me because I don't know exactly how you go about this, but how do you vet a good psychic?
Christina.
Yeah.
Well, for me, first of all, I encounter so many quote unquote so-called psychics, especially after a few years ago when the TV shows started utilizing psychics. All of a sudden, it became popular. It's so crazy because being a psychic is, had such a negative cloud that shrouds it, as people being fakers and scammers. And then all of a sudden it became more acceptable in the paranormal field from television. And it just seemed like overnight people were switching their names to medium so-and-so and crazy and saying that they've got, these abilities. I actually kind of test a lot of people that, say that they're psychics just for their accuracy. But first of all, when you're getting a reading from a true psychic, you should not have to give any background information. If the psychic seems to be, leading questions, stuff like, or saying stuff like, "Oh, I see, a male figure or a mother figure," because everybody has a grandparent or somebody that's usually by that time has passed away. A lot of cold reads, there's people that will read your body language, and depending on how you respond to whatever they're saying, they can adjust from there. So normally, a real psychic should not have to ask you a lot of questions or an interaction, where you're doing the reading, because the information that's coming, through the psychic is not meant for the psychic. So it's either going to make sense to the person you're reading or it's not. And so many people, I think, are worried about not being able to be accurate. And so, again, I see a lot of them doing a lot of leading questions. And So I think those are some of the telltale signs. I also look for people who have, actual references, just like, any dog, especially if they're charging for readings, because who
Right.
wants to
I
go?
I go by price they're charging as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know people that are charging hundreds of dollars, for readings, and I've had them read me, and they've not been accurate at all. Even I did free readings most of my life until up to about 2 years ago or a year ago, and I finally, just because people were taking such advantage of the fact that I did free readings, they would call me all hours of the day and night. Sometimes people wouldn't make a move without having to ask me, what to do first, all these different things. And that's not what my role is, as a psychic. So I started charging, but my charge is, at this point, is just a donation of whatever they feel that the reading was worth. Because I didn't want to stop people from getting readings if they need them, but I realized there had to be some type of exchange. Otherwise, people don't really value what you're doing, or the information you're giving them. But I would say those are some of the things to look for.
Yeah, and coming from the paranormal perspective, and Corey and I have talked about this before, as far as vetting a psychic on the team, you go into location blind.
Absolutely.
And
they should never have any information on. That's why, with us, we have a case manager, and the case manager takes all the information. Our historian does all the research on that. And then myself and my co-founder, we just know the address of where we're supposed to show up that night and walk through. We do, each of us do a separate walkthrough by ourselves, and we jot down any information that we get. Then we put our pads away. We go in with the group, do our full investigation, and then at the, and we can use the information that we picked up on, as well as anything that's happened throughout the case, to get validation and decide, what's the best route of moving forward. That's kind of how we do it. But I never want any information prior. And people don't understand, because if you give people information, then it's very easy to, again, Google it and, try to find out information before you do the reading. So people have to be very careful when you are getting a reading to divulge information or too much information.
Exactly, because your psychic should be able to go in blind, and whatever names that psychic gets picked up on, whatever events that psychic picks up on, should match history, should match prior residents, whatnot. And that's how you vet a psychic on a team.
Well, it was like last year at the Paracon. It was the first time I had met, everybody in person, and James and Mike and Dave and yourself. And everybody knew that I was a psychic medium, but again, nobody had personally got a reading from me, or had I investigated with them in the past. And so we went into the bar. It was Dave, myself, Mike, and James Tyson. We were all there, and James had asked me, was I picking up on anything in the bar? And I said, absolutely. And I pointed out 2 people that I saw, a woman and a man, and blew them away. And not only did I blow them away, but even SJ and her husband, because I had actually gotten the name of the woman that had died at the theater next door. And I actually had got her name and everything. And so that wasn't anything that was public knowledge or stuff like that. So again, it's either you're right on, or you're really, really off. It's usually one or the other for people.
Right.
You know, one of the things, and I haven't vetted a lot of psychics. I know some that I believe are reliable and that are good and that are authentic. But when I look at somebody who's claiming to be a psychic, I look for I want to hear them tell me that they hated their gift, that they struggled with their gifts and that it affected their lives. I've run into so many people who they say they're psychic and they're all happy about it. And for $20, they'll make, you believe them and your life will be better because you listen to them. And they never seem to admit or mention that somewhere along the lines, they struggled with the idea that they were psychic. It's almost like they just decided one day they were going to be psychic. And I have a hard time believing that. Mm-hmm. But when I hear somebody say that, when they were 10 years old and they started realizing they could do this and it really screwed up their childhood, I tend to believe them. I have more faith in that than I do somebody who's setting up a booth willing to do readings for $20 or $40 or $50 and has never seemed to struggle with what they have.
Well, I think you're right on to something right there, because I personally have never known a psychic that was just all happy and gung-ho that they have these abilities. Because, first of all, it's not something that we ask for. And it is very hard to struggle. Like with me, I'm 50 years old. So when I, was growing up with this, I also was Catholic. And so talking about things like this was taboo anyway. And they tell you, don't talk about it. It's not, spirits aren't real, all this kind of stuff. And so I really struggled growing up, because as soon as anybody, like I get along with people really easy and make friends, but as soon as anybody would catch wind of the fact that I could see and communicate with spirits, it would scare them away. And then I was like blacklisted from the school. So, and then even growing up, you had to really keep all of this under wraps, because say you you tell a doctor or you tell somebody that you're, hearing voices and things like that, you could end up being committed. I have known people with psychic abilities that have gone through divorces and have lost their children due to the fact of their psychic abilities. There's all kinds of things. I've always said that it's a half and half of like a curse and a blessing. I've never talked to anybody that has gone through this and said, "Oh, I'm so glad I had these abilities and they were given to me." No, it's one hell of a ride. And especially when you're young, you have no idea what's going on, no idea how to control it. I didn't even know what the hell psychic abilities were at the time when I was young. And of course we didn't have the internet. So all I could do was go to the library, and they didn't even have books at the time really on any psychic abilities. They had, like witchcraft and things like that. And so for a while I thought maybe I was a witch, but I didn't really know. And then I went to a psychic fair and I was, seeing all these people reading. I'm like, wow, that's kind of like me. And Sylvia Brown actually happened to be one of the people that were reading. And this was, back in like the early 80s. And so we went to San Francisco for her, paid like $60 for a reading. And do you know that the woman was so absolutely off? It was ridiculous. And I just shook my head, and I was listening to her afterwards give other people readings, and it was upsetting me because she was not giving them the actual real information. She was giving them a bunch of BS. I could have given them a better, reading, but at the time I didn't, again, understand. Ended up playing with the Ouija board, got an attachment, so I tried to shut my abilities down. There's just so much. So it's not an enjoyable process. Like now that I'm 50 and I've, there's more information out there. I know what's going on. Now I teach other people about, their psychic abilities, especially, children and teenagers. So now I can see all the good I'm able to do with my abilities. But again, it still feels like half and half a curse because I never have any privacy. Never. You know, people always say, oh, I've got abilities, but I so wish I could see spirits like you do. And I'm like, really? No, you don't. You know, be careful what you ask for. Because I'm like, you know, how would you like to be taking a shower or going to the bathroom and you look up and you've got, you know, a bunch of spirits staring at you or a spirit staring at you? You know, think about when you're having sex with your spouse and you look over their shoulder and you've got like a gallery of people watching, like, you know, that's a porno that they're watching. I mean, you get no privacy. Some of the spirits come and they want a demand for you to give, you know, messages. And it's not that easy to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I know you don't know me, but I'm a psychic medium and I have a message for you from so-and-so, because I've done it before. It can either turn out really, really good. And they're very, very happy and glad that you did it. And there's other people who don't believe in that. And they think that you call you everything but your own name, think you're a devil worshiper, all kinds of stuff. So it's definitely an interesting ride, but you know, as I said, it's a half and half. I've never known anybody who says, oh, I was given these gifts and I've loved it the whole time. Bull crap.
Excellent. And yeah, I completely agree. Too many people, you can tell the fakes by the excitement.
Yeah, and I never try to convince anybody, you know, that I'm a psychic or the paranormal exists. Like, that's not my job. You know, if a person, you know, comes to me and wants a reading, that's exactly what I'll give them. And they, you know, it's either going to be accurate, it's not. They're either going to, you know, get what they're looking for or they're not. I mean, but I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. I know that my abilities exist. I know they're very accurate. You know, not only in private readings, but in investigations. I've worked on missing people cases, murder cases, all with high accuracy. So I don't feel like I have anything to prove to anybody, but I'm definitely, you know, willing to give them a reading and make them a believer, hopefully.
Christina, as a medium, can I ask you a question? Not a reading or anything, but I've noticed this going through the groups, and I just want to know if you've seen this trend. I will see somebody, and they will come into a group, and they will start with, they think they might have some psychic abilities, or they're developing this intuition, and they kind of sit in the group for a while, and they talk, and they interact, and then a couple months later, they've advanced their abilities, and then a little while after that, they're doing free readings, and then within 9 months to a year, they're all of a sudden offering to do readings for whatever dollar amount. Right. And I want to know, I'm curious, have you seen or noticed a trend like that? And what do you think it's going to do to the psychic medium field in general, having all these of 6 months to a year develop their own quote unquote abilities?
Well, I mean, first of all, it doesn't work that way. It's not like you just start utilizing them and all of a sudden you just have all these abilities. And again, like I said earlier in the show, we are all born with psychic abilities. So either by the time you went into school, either they're completely open and they're not going to go away, or a lot of times, depending on the environment, religious beliefs and background, by the time that they're 5 and enter school, they really kind of put up a block because they've been told that, you know, oh, it's an imaginary friend, it's your imagination, it doesn't exist, you know. And so then when you get into school, same thing. So they seem to there's like a block there. And so again, you know, you can unblock that and activate, you know, your abilities, but it's not like they're going to come full circle in a year and you're going to be able to do everything I do. It doesn't work that way. And it really bothers me. And I think it kind of gives a black eye to the the real psychic mediums out there, and it makes it very, very hard for clients who are looking for a psychic to read a good psychic, because again, a lot of times, people end up, not having to go to multiples, and they're very disappointed because they're not getting any kind of information. And so then, they look bad at the society in the community itself, opposed to, that's just somebody. And there's a huge amount of flood, of people that are coming through that don't have abilities, but it's a way to kind of fake it and make some money on the side, or, create a career for yourself. Because again, now in the paranormal, say 5 or 6 years ago, nobody wanted to have a psychic on their team. If you had a psychic on your team, you basically, people would look down on you and think that you're not very credible. You're really not doing research. You're, relying on information that a fake psychic gives you. But things have changed now. And so now you see that just about all the teams have a resident psychic medium or somebody that they will call on in their investigations. So it is, hurting the field, I think, with so many people out there. And I really don't understand, if I had to pick anything, I surely, especially because there's still, the stigma of being psychic. That's not something I would want to just pick up and say, hey, now I'm a psychic. Because, if you're really not a psychic, or, you don't have these abilities activated, you can, you ruin your own reputation. So, I don't know. It's a pretty bad idea.
I'd like to move along here to the next possible question coming up and say, Mr. Markham, what have you got as a second question?
Hang on. I'm just wondering, and I've asked this before, but I think the forum I asked it in, everybody was afraid to let their hair down, because I don't think I got necessarily the truth. You're told, or and I don't mean a matter of faith or anything else. It is just as clear a fact as water is wet, sand is dry, there is no afterlife, there is no spirit, it's one and done. Are you going to live your life differently?
Nope. Not that change a thing.
Yeah, I probably would.
Just got to be different, don't you?
A little bit. Honestly, I think I would.
Different?
I don't know that I would, or what I would do different, but I think I know myself well enough to say that if I knew for a fact it was one and done, I would probably do some things differently. Maybe I would be a meaner person. I don't know. Maybe I would drink less coffee and more bourbon. I don't know, but I think that if I knew for a fact it was one and done, it would change me.
Oh, I know I definitely would. I mean, I'd be off the hook probably. I have very little impulse control as it is. If it was one and done and no consequences, yeah. I know it would be a different. I don't know how different or how far into the spectrum of evil I would shift to, or if I would go the other way, but it definitely would be different.
Well, you got to remember, one and done doesn't mean there's not still laws. It's only the laws that keep people in check.
But maybe the laws were put in place by wise people who said, hey, if we don't tell these people that there's a big daddy God looking over them, and they start raping, pillaging, doing as they please, being, not having any regard for their fellow inhabitants. There's not going to be a civilization. There's not going to be face it, civilization and cultures, a lot of what made them evolve was all fear-driven or, reward-based. And, what's the ultimate reward? Oh, if you're good, you get to go to heaven, play a harp, float on a cloud, or whatever. I'm being facetious, obviously, right. But if people didn't have the motivation or the hope for something being better later or some kind of reward, I don't think we would ever become civilized. I think we'd be just like sharks or any other creature that has no concept of an afterlife. Just do whatever.
I don't know. Personally, I kind of like my life the way it is. I don't think I'd really change much.
No. Well, I'm going to say for me, I would probably keep it the same. People who know me personally would probably think that I'm crazy because from childhood on, I have experienced every catastrophe and trauma-based things that could possibly happen to a person. But, when I think about it, would I go back and change those? Would I like to? Probably. But would I? Probably not. Just because everything that I've gone through in life has made me who I am today. And I don't think that with the struggles and the traumas that I went through, I would be a much different person. Because I'm very, very strong. And I think I would be, maybe the complete opposite and maybe, a depressed, suicidal girl, who knows?
Yeah, and same thing with me. People have asked me if you knew you were going to have PTSD today and you couldn't live life normal, would you change anything? No, I wouldn't. To me, trauma and crisis builds your strength, and that's what makes you able to help people that maybe have gone through the same thing you have.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's life building lessons, whether it's combat, whether it's, I don't know, some crime you've been through, an accident you've been through, whatever the case is, it makes you who you are in the future.
Yep.
And it establishes what your purpose in life is.
Yeah, but who would you be, or what? Okay, there's not so much. I'm not talking so much about experience. I'm just saying outlook, not even outlook. What would be? What would be your motivation for helping other people? If there was no reward later, or, what I'm getting at is, I'm sure that there are people who would be just as good and just as kind as they are anyway, without the hope of a reward. But there's a lot of people that probably just, one bedtime story away from having turned out like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy, that, they'd be off the hook. They would not have any restraint whatsoever if it was a one and done.
Well, see, I don't, and that's where I believe in reincarnation. That's my belief system. So I don't believe in going to a heaven. I don't believe in going to a hell. I don't believe in going to a wonderful place when I die. I'm going to come back. So I don't get a heaven if I help people. I help people because I want to.
Okay, but you've also got this idea that you will be reincarnated. I'm saying if all of the thing, if all from birth to death is all there is, nothing gets reincarnated, nothing goes, you get to a certain age and you know that from that moment on that you become aware of, life, that when it's done, it's done. There's nothing else after that. No reincarnation, no heaven, no hell, just total, you completely cease. Nothing goes past this life. Now, knowing that there's no cycle, there's nothing. Now, how do we conduct our daily lives?
I still don't think I'd change anything.
I'm not sure what I'd change, but I'm sure I'm not saying that I would go out and rape and pillage and commit massive crimes just because, there'd be no consequences at the end. But I believe that it would change me, and I don't know if I would say that I'd do things that I've done in the past differently. I'm sure there would be some, but I think it would definitely change how I acted and how I looked at life and what I did.
Probably going for more experiences, I would imagine.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. There are some risks that I may have taken, but for whatever reason, I didn't take them. But if I knew that it was one and done, maybe I would take them. And they're not crimes. They're just people I had the chance to interact with, or just things that I would have done differently.
All right, we got one more quick question in there. We got about 14 minutes left of the show. Been an outstanding show tonight. Thank you, Corey, for running the studio as always. So do we have one more quick question?
How about, what do you got, Everett?
Okay. And Eric, this one I'm sure you'll be able to run with. Mainstream science always says that if we discovered life, we wouldn't even be able to recognize it necessarily because it would be so different from anything that we've ever seen. But as they're finding more and more Earth-like planets, do any of you think that is going to change, in that it's plausible that if there's another planet like Earth, the evolution on that planet could be similar, and there could be or will be life on there that is somewhat similar or recognizable to humans?
Okay, I think it depends on the basic building blocks. If it's a carbon-based, if the planet is set up in such a way that it is carbon-based life, I think we would recognize it as, life. We would, it might not recognize what it was as far as what kind of creature, benign, malevolent, whatever. But I think as long as we had those common building blocks in common with this new life, we'd recognize it. But if silicon is very close to carbon, can form some of the same kind of bonds, we might, there might be silicon-based life here on the planet, and we're just thinking they're rock. I think depending on what building blocks there are that the life evolved from is going to determine whether we can recognize it.
And there you have it, the scientific answer. As far as other life, it sure the hell don't look like us.
But we could recognize if it reproduces, if it has certain, if it's carbon based, it's probably going to have some kind of respiration, some kind of metabolism that we would recognize. But if it was made out of sulfur or something else, we might not. I'm not saying we would be able to communicate with it, or we would have any. I think alien life is going to be so alien that there's not going to be a framework for understanding, because if it's truly alien, maybe it doesn't have this life form does not have a concept of good, evil, alive, dead. Just imagine, even if you run into a race of people and you recognize them as people, but say something as simple as a concept of time is not in their paradigm. That in its own right is going to create, you just think of the conversations or the decisions you make day to day in which time or the concept of time plays a part. Do I stop and get my favorite drink on the way to work? No, I don't have time. If I do, I'll be late to work. Here again, time. When you think of how integrated and almost unconscious time is, what would happen if you ran into a race of people there was no time for them? Just that one element would make communicating, how do you do past tense if there's no time?
But Eric, do you think that the whole idea of mainstream science saying, well, we wouldn't necessarily be able to understand or recognize any alien life is just a way to dismiss or avoid any potential alien race that's here, just a way to kind of placate society, saying, there can't be grays here because they wouldn't evolve that way. They would evolve in a way that we wouldn't even be able to comprehend.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of the cop-out. I mean, I believe that there are life forms out there that are so absolutely, literally alien to us that we may not be able to conceive of. You can't conceive of them, and if you met them, you'd have no idea. But I think it's going to be on a continuum. It's going to be like a Gaussian curve. The vast majority of carbon-based life is going to fall in that medium, that median that is within 2 standard deviations of the center. There's going to be that average, bipedal, 2 eyes, 2 ears, because of the forces that make that body style evolve. But yeah, I think when they say stuff like that, anytime a scientist comes out and says, oh, absolutely, it tells you right then they're either debunking or they're just too close-minded to consider what's really going on, because we have no idea what's out there. We can't eliminate anything. We can't eliminate stuff on our own planet, let alone a universe that we haven't explored. I mean, they find species, things live like the life that is around the black smokers, those volcanic vents in the deep, the deep trenches. Would they even recognize that as life 100 years ago? It uses a completely different form of metabolism. So when they say we wouldn't recognize it, it's just their way of saying, yeah, I think you hit it on the head. They're just trying to poo-poo the idea and throw up a wall against further inquiry.
Excellent. Excellent. And on that note, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Christina. Outstanding roundtable. And folks,
thanks for having me.
Oh, hell yeah. So I got to say to our listeners and to Forest Moon Paranormal, happy Daddy Day. I say Daddy Day because, well, a father is on the birth certificate. A daddy is what your children see you as. And it is Daddy Day. And it's going to be a long day. And next Saturday, we're talking the Bilderbergs, Lost Circle, and how many of these elite own and manipulate companies. So don't miss next week. If you guys want to jump in on that conversation, by all means, let me know.
And here, real quick, before we run out of time, Christina, how can people find anything that they need to find for you on the net?
Well, you can either go to the network itself, uprntalkradio.com, or you can go to Facebook and either look up Paranormal Connections radio show, which is Monday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, a 2-hour show. And then on Thursdays, I have Top Secret News radio show, same time, just on Thursdays. And all the archives are always, I always put the promo up the day of the show, and the archive is always on the in the comment sections for the link for the archive.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Dave, sorry, it's getting late for me too. Eric and Everett, you guys do Newswire and stuff for Spaced Out Radio. You guys give a little bit of how everybody can find that.
Eric, you go ahead because I just Google it.
Okay, we can be found at spacedoutradio.com. We have the Encounter online. They'll be coming up soon. There's going to be some exclusive content. We're going to start interviewing some people and putting, these little, won't be like a 3-hour show taking questions. It'll just be a one-on-one conversation type content that you can listen to. And of course, Space Out Radio is on midnight to 3 a.m. Eastern, 9 to midnight Pacific time, and we are live 7 days a week. Dave Scott during the week, and then James Tyson and Elizabeth Anglin on the weekends.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate everybody coming on here. Christina, know that your health is a little bit iffy there, so we greatly appreciate you being able to come on. Eric, you want to give a little spiel of how everybody can find Forest Moon?
Oh, yeah. As always, most of our listeners do know where Forest Moon Paranormal is, but if you're a new listener, go on Facebook. Just look for Forest Moon Paranormal. Make sure you join the group. Probably one of the fastest acting groups out there, and I take great pride with saying that. So, everyone, see you next weekend, Saturday. Make sure you listen in to Spaced Out Radio every night, and you all have a great week.
Thank you, everybody, and good night.